The most pressing issue facing our community right now is institutional expansion. The proposed growth of Harvard, of BC, of St. Elizabeth's, these threaten our residential community. And these institutions have a responsibility to our community. The city has a responsibility to our community. And if I'm elected city councilor, I will have a responsibility to our community, to protect our community, to ensure that our interests are respected, our concerns are not just heard, but acted upon, responded to, respected. We all have gone to countless meetings in the last 6 months, the last year, BC, Harvard, St. Elizabeth's, all of them. And we hear the same things over and over again. And we express the same concerns. And we all feel that we're not being listened to. As city councilor, I will serve as a facilitator for our community. I will serve as a voice for our community. I will fight for our community with specific ideas and specific demands of these colleges and universities. First and foremost, let's look at the process. The process right now, which is essentially a product of the BRA, is flawed. And I have specific proposals to address those concerns. One, the meetings that I was just talking about. They're not even mandatory until the university files an actual plan. So many of the meetings that we've all been sitting in for the last year aren't mandatory. They're not required, the universities or colleges, to give us interim feedback. So we sit there and we say, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And we hear nothing for months on end. And when we ask, we're told, well, these meetings aren't even required. We don't even have to do this, and we don't have to give you interim reports until we file our plan. Well, that's wrong. And I will introduce legislation to change that. I will make the meetings mandatory and the interim reports mandatory. The other real serious issue we're facing right now is that when they do file their plans, finally, the clock starts to run. The BRA clock starts to run. And whether it's 30 days or 45 days or 90 days, that's all we have as a community to give our feedback and to get actual feedback back from the universities. That's not enough time. So we sit around for a year wasting time at these meetings. Finally, they submit their plan, the clock starts to run, and we have no time to respond. We're seeing it right now with Harvard. They finally submitted their actual plan for the science complex that they want to build on Western Ave. The clock starts to run, 90 days. So now the Harvard Task Force and people from the community are going to meetings every single week, several times a week, rushing to try to get our feedback. That's not right. This is our community. We need more time, and I would change the law to make sure that there is sufficient time for the community to give feedback. And as city councilor, I will be a facilitator of that feedback. I will help to build consensus so that we know where to draw the line. Where do we want to draw the line in the sand? BC, for example, wants to put undergraduate dorms on what they call the Brighton campus, which is the Archdiocese property. We don't support that. Nobody in this community supports that, and I will fight that. But what's interesting, and what a lot of people don't realize, is BC has room for those students on its core campus. If you look at their plan, they have an area where what are called the mods are located. They're single-story dorms. BC's proposal for that property is to put up 3- and 4-story townhouses, so they're going to create a little housing complex. That's not a good use of that space. If they put 6- and 7-story dorms on that space in their core campus, they're not going to need to try to cram 600 students across Comm Ave. They cannot be allowed to do that. Let them use the space that they have. We have to have specific ideas and proposals to bring back to them. As the city councilor, I tell people all the time that as an attorney, I know when to stand up and object, but I also know how to sit down and negotiate and mediate and accomplish tasks. One thing that comes up frequently at the meetings is people say, well, Harvard says they'll do this, or BC says they'll do that, but how do we know they're going to do it? We're going to get it in writing. That's how we're going to do it. As an attorney, I know how to draft the language. I know how to draft contracts. I know how to negotiate contracts. That's what we're going to need. We need somebody who will speak for us, will serve as a consensus builder for us, but also who can accomplish and ensure that the things that we want out of this process we get, and we get it in writing. Here's another example of something we need to get in writing. Conservation easements. A lot of the concern around this development is that we're losing green space. As it is, Alston Brighton has the least amount of open space in the city. That Archdiocese property is an oasis right now. Much of the property that Harvard has bought down along the river is beautiful green space connecting our community to the river. We want access to that space. We want that space protected. One of my proposals is that all of these developments, whether it be a college, a university, a private developer, there has to be a certain amount of set aside of open space. It has to be done by what's called a conservation easement, which is a legal restriction. I understand how that works. I understand zoning and permitting. That's what I do as a lawyer. I do that kind of work. I represent tenants, I represent landlords, I deal with zoning and permitting and appeals. That's the kind of experience, those are the skills that we need to address institutional expansion. These are complex issues, but we together as a community can protect our community. I, as City Council, will make sure that Harvard and BC are aware, that they are part of our community. They're not supplanting our community. So we have specific proposals. I have specific proposals. I will be a facilitator and a leader of this community on these issues. That's what we need.